This is The Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral.com.
Good afternoon, Tuscaloosa, Internet World. West Alabama, how are we doing? This is the Joe Gaither Show. You're watching us right here on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube, right here at Joe Gaither 6, wherever you get your social medias. I'm Joe Gaither. You're the viewer or the listener. You're also listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Amazon. Hopefully you download, rate, review the show on whatever your favorite podcast platform is. We're going to have a fun show today. We hope you and yours are doing well on this hump day. It's Wednesday. It's raining outside in Tuscaloosa. So if you are in the West Alabama area, you need to be careful as you're getting out and about. But we are going to have a lot of fun today by talking with my friend Will Miller. You can find him on the Twitter machine at RealWB He's been covering all things Alabama baseball for Bama Central throughout the entire season. So with A-Day put to bed on Saturday, with Alabama basketball eliminated and the national championship over with last week, it's time to really dive into spring sports because, look, they've been on the back burner. I'll admit it. These guys have been on the back burner, guys and girls, in both the diamond sports. And I know it hasn't really gone great in the softball world. It's gone okay in the baseball world, but it's time to really follow the last home stretch of the baseball season. So we do that by bringing in Will Miller. We're also going to talk some basketball headlines. We're going to talk some transfer portal news, hit on some A-Day stuff as well, and see where the conversation takes us. But first, hello, Will Miller. How are you doing? I hope your Wednesday's going well.
Yeah, Joe, it's that busy time in the semester. You all know how it is. You've been a college student as well. That's just where things are. It's near the end of April, but we're making it through. I had some stuff to do this morning. Was able to shore up on obviously lots in the future. But aside from that, doing pretty good. Like you mentioned, Joe, the diamond sports are in full swing. Baseball's in full swing. I've got my Braves hat on right now. Reynaldo Lopez is going to win the National League Cy Young. No doubt about it. I'm kidding. But to your point, they're in the thick of it, and they have been for some time. Conference play has been going on for a few weeks now, but I feel like now at this juncture of the season, like you kind of mentioned, there's an opportunity for kind of some more focus, and especially with a big series coming up this weekend for this Alabama baseball team against number 1 Texas A&M.
Well, there we go. Alabama is playing number 1 Texas A&M this weekend. Back-to-back weekends, Will Miller, that Alabama is hosting the number 1 team in the country. We've talked about it on the program before, and our listeners and viewers aren't dumb. They know how loaded the SEC is. We haven't looked at it in quite some time, but if you're living under a rock, it's A&M, it's Arkansas, it's Kentucky, it's Tennessee, all in the top 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then you go your next SEC team, Vanderbilt at 13. And then it's Alabama at 18 in your latest D1 baseball ranking. So not really doing too bad, but you're sitting there top 25, but you're what, 5th, 6th in the conference? You look at the conference standings, Alabama at 6-9. They're in 4th place in the SEC West. Will, what's been the story of this year? We know it's Rob Bond's first year. We know he brings in a bunch of transfers, some from Maryland, some from other programs. We know it's the Wolfpack mentality at the plate. We remember Riley Quick getting hurt with the arm injury right off the bat of the season. So where have we gone? What's these 37 games? Tell us kind of the story of the season.
The story is that this team's played a lot of great competition, both individually and then from a team standpoint. A lot of new faces, like we mentioned on an earlier episode, and that's one of the things that you look at this team and one of the things that sticks out to you. But this team has played, the SEC's a gauntlet, but even beyond that, they've just played some really, really tough customers in this baseball season. The pitching staff has been besieged by injuries. There have been other ones other than Riley Quick, which is really unfortunate on so many levels, whether you're a player, whether you're a coach, or even a stakeholder in the team or a fan. But that's part of the game. It seems like this team's caught some bad breaks over the last number of years, but as has sometimes been the case, they've had some guys step up to fill that position. Most notably, this past Sunday, when freshman lefty Zane Adams went out there against number 1 Arkansas and went 8 scoreless innings. It was by far the longest start by an Alabama pitcher this season, and if he can do that every week, you feel pretty good. But that was one of the best performances of the season. all that to say, they have players that have the talent to step in where they're needed. They have kind of had some struggles at the plate ever since SEC play started. That's to be expected. There's some regression to be expected, especially when you're facing the caliber of pitching that you are night in and night out. With Arkansas being one of the best pitching teams in the entire country, as one example. But this team is in a good position right now. They got to play number one back-to-back weeks, and that's a tall order for anybody. But I said this the first time you had me on to break down this baseball season, that a lot of these big series are home games at Sewell Thomas Stadium, and that's the case here for Texas A&M this weekend. It was the case for Arkansas this past weekend, and that's when you start having the conversation about, when it comes to having that arduous task of taking 2 out of 3 in a series against a great team. To have that home field advantage on your side can mean everything, and that's what this team has right now. So it's another opportunity. First series win against the number one team since 2009 last weekend. First shutout of a number one team ever. Lots of opportunities for this team to continue what, in my opinion, even though they've had some tough losses, is an upward trajectory.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you hit on the upward trajectory. I'm looking at just the recent results. Alabama's on a 5-game losing streak, and then they beat Arkansas 2 out of 3 over the weekend. They lose to UAB yesterday in midweek play. Another case where the bats really can't get it going. Yeah. So what's it going to take for them to string together the consistency where, you're beating number one Arkansas and you're playing very well in SEC play, but you're also, you kind of having some midweek losses, and you're in good position in the SEC with the NCAA tournament selections, but you want to win these midweek games. You can't, you don't want to lose these games to inferior opponents. And not to say that UAB is inferior, but it's less of it's more splitting hairs in baseball than it is in other sports.
Absolutely.
But you just don't want to lose these midweek games. So how does Alabama string consistency together?
Well, it's very important. The midweeks are very important. You'll recall 2 years ago when they lost a dozen of them, and that kept them out of the NCAA tournament. And I was at a lot of those games, and those were not some of the brighter moments in program history. I'll tell you that much. Generally speaking, UAB has kind of had Alabama's number over the last few years, and I'm starting to wonder if that's more the story of the series than anything. This season, I should say, this spring, they played twice, and Alabama needed extras to beat them the first time. They were down 4-0 very early, and a similar story kind of played out last night when UAB came out and threw the first punch. But they've kind of had they've kind of had it this series over the last 3-4 years or so. It's been tough. I believe 2 years ago in the same thing I mentioned about the midweeks and keeping them out of the NCAA tournament, I believe 2 of those dozen or so midweek losses was to UAB. I believe they lost both times. 2023 season, they played at Regents Field in Birmingham, lost in extra innings. I think it was a 12-inning game. It was either 12 or 13. It's just one of those, like, you're a fight fan like myself. You appreciate the Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira reference. Maybe UAB is Alabama's Alex Pereira. It feels to me like I said, they just have a beat on this series, and last night it showed yet again. Last night was a really hard luck day for Alabama because the bats didn't really have it all the way together, but UAB scored 2 runs in the first inning and had exactly 1 ball leave the infield, and that happens in baseball. You play 60 some odd games. If you factor in the postseason, however it goes, may play even more if you go deep. Things are going to happen, and you're going to have peaks and valleys. They've lost 2 midweeks in a row now, lost 5-4 to South Alabama last week. That's not what you want to be doing, but it's also an item where I feel like that will be addressed. And I mean, they get up for the SEC games, no doubt about it. I mean, they really don't have much of a choice. These are the best teams in college baseball. But if you're playing a midweek, you really do have to make sure that if you do win that series like last weekend against Arkansas, that you're not riding the high into then a lull going into whatever your next game is. Did that happen? That's anybody's guess. The offense didn't have it after the first inning. Coach Vaughn said he thought the energy level was fine. Like I said, you play 60 games, give or take. Stuff is going to happen, especially when the other team kind of has your number.
All right, so we're talking to Will Miller, and you guys need to follow him at Real WB Miller on Twitter for all the Alabama baseball coverage. He and Kim Rankin covering it all for BamaCentral.com on Thursday at 6, Friday at 6, and Saturday at 2. Is that what it's all?
Yes,
Alabama's hosting the number 1 overall team in the country, Texas A&M, for the second straight weekend series. Will, I wanted to ask you, I want you to focus and tell us about 2 newcomers on the left side of the infield. I want you to talk about Gage Miller, and I want you to talk about Justin LeBron. 2 guys brand new to the team. Obviously, Gage Miller transferred, Justin LeBron, a freshman, both contributing and impacting the team in different areas, but just kind of what it means. I mean, you lost Jim Jarvis. You wanted that great glove back. I mean, you needed to replace that great glove. So you kind of did that with Justin LeBron. But the power at the plate that Gage Miller has given you, just speak on what those 2 guys have given you and how exciting they are as newcomers for the team.
Yeah, the left side of the infield obviously is an important position group defensively. And, Alabama had some really good guys at those positions last year. Colby Shelton and Bryce Eblin alternating at third, and Jim Jarvis at short. And Eblin is still on the team playing second, which is his more natural position. And he's got a power bat in his own right. It's been absolutely incredible at the bottom of the lineup. But Gage Miller has been an absolute revelation. I've said this a lot, and I think it's a great testament to the eye that this coaching staff had when they were building this roster and they were looking around. They did have to replace pretty much the entire batting order from last year, but Gage Miller has been at the top of the order since day one. The coaches have had continued belief in him. He's been showing his power since the fall, and it's carried over into the regular season. Suffice it to say, he's got 15 home runs, hit one against UAB last night to lead off the game. He's got pretty good defense at third base too. I would say defensively, he's an upgrade. But it's really just getting on base, hitting for power. He doesn't just hit for power, but it's great to have it when a guy does. He checks the boxes. He's been everything this coaching staff hoped for, and I think that's the most important thing. Again, when you're putting your stamp on a program, if you're Rob Vaughn and his staff, and you have your eye on a guy like that, it's great when he pans out. And for Justin LeBron, he's a freshman, an 18-year-old kid thrown into the bright lights of SEC baseball. And not only that, but replacing a guy that's been a model of not only consistency, but excellent at shortstop in Jim Jarvis. And it seems like he's been up to the challenge, recognizes what it is to be in that position at his age. But his defensive acumen is incredible. He made a great play last night. I was sitting in the press box while the jumping throw a la Derek Jeter. And I literally in the press box, I looked over to the guy next to me and I said, no play. And he got the guy out. So he's done that on a few occasions. And he's got the ability to do it. And his bat's pretty good. It'll continue to get better. Like I said, he's young. He's getting used to SEC pitching. He's got 6 home runs on the year, if I'm not mistaken. And he's actually been moved up to the 3 hole in the order. He's batted all over the place, but the coaching staff kind of switched up the batting order over the last couple of weeks, particularly after that really rough Kentucky series 2 weeks ago. And that was as tough sledding offensively as this team's probably going to see all year. That team is a machine. But those 2 guys have been great for this team on so many levels. Offensively, defensively, they're really good. And in terms of being new to this program, I don't know that you would know it. I really don't know that you would know it. The learning curve's obviously going to be there, but they've risen to it.
All right, so Will, my memory last year was at Sewell Thomas Stadium, the regional, Alabama hosting, and really getting late into the night, but the Joe still being pretty electric. That's one going to be it sticks with you right there, and you haven't. And so I ask you, building off that, where does Alabama stand in its efforts to replicate hosting a regional? You see them there at D1 baseball at 18 this week, and obviously they beat Arkansas on the season on the series last weekend. Big series this weekend, and 5 SEC series left to go until the SEC tournament up there in dangerous Hoover. But
yes,
first, re-explain the rules, who hosts the regionals, and then second, where's Alabama fit in? Are they fitting comfortably in hosting a regional, or are they still fighting for that position?
That's a really good question, Joe. I think that's something that people would be itching to see again. It was a great experience last year. You were there. And I think that Alabama will have to make up some ground right now in the SEC. The regionals go in the top 16 national seeds. So the committee will meet on selection Monday. It's a Monday, and they will assign their top 16 seeds. The criteria is, there's a human element to it, but whoever gets those will host a regional. And then, like in Alabama's case last year, they were the number 16, the very last regional host. This particular time, they'll have to do a little bit more work. I believe they're hovering around 10th in the SEC standings right now, which can be improved on. Like I said, they had tough sledding in a couple of series. They had 3 competitive games against Georgia that they lost all 3, and they got walked off in the first one. It really could have gone either way if certain things had gone differently, and that goes back to my point about it's baseball. You play 60 games. But if they can win this series next weekend or this upcoming weekend, that'll go a long way. Just be consistent. Like you said, string it together, be consistent. Take 2 out of 3, maybe sweep. If you can sweep, you'd love it. And that's certainly the mentality that this team has. But just win those series, get those ranked victories. There'll be no shortage of opportunities. Build up that RPI, build up that ranking, get a high seed in the SEC tournament. Alabama was a number 9 seed in the SEC tournament last year, and they did get a couple of big wins over there at the Hoover Met. But that was the seed, and then they went on to host a regional. I think that speaks more than anything to the depth of the SEC. Get around that mark, top 8, and then win a few in Hoover, and you have a strong record. You should be in good shape. That's what this team will probably need to accomplish. Like I said, it can be done, but this is a gauntlet. It's not going to be easy for anybody.
All right, so Alabama's hosting Texas A&M again this weekend, and they hit the road back-to-back weekends against the 2 Mississippi schools, Ole Miss and Mississippi State. Then their last home series is here against LSU, and then they'll have the finale on the road at Auburn. So, Will Miller, one more time, sell the people. Why should they come to support the team against Texas A&M and against LSU? 2 more home series, 6 more SEC games, 6 more opportunities to get to the Joe, guaranteed at least. Hopefully there's going to be more, but what's the pitch? Your last little bit of time to support Rob Vaughn this year.
Well, number one, you can see me in the press box. That's a great attraction, obviously.
Absolutely, that's the number one attraction.
But in all seriousness, Coach Vaughn has talked about a brand of baseball that this team wants to play, and it's an exciting brand of baseball. You talked about the pack offense. That's a real thing. This team hits. This team sends it over the wall. Right field has been great. That's as much of a part of the atmosphere as anything. The right field terrace student section, they have brought it all year long. And it helps when you want to be a part of that. When you're in the stadium, wherever it is that you're sitting, the atmospheres have definitely been on an uptick from when I first started covering the team, which was 2 years ago or so. And it's the atmosphere is palpable. And you know what? Like I said, if you want to see this team win these games, be part of the atmosphere. This home field advantage is nothing without fans. It's nothing without everything that the fans are doing to affect the game, and they can affect the game, especially in college sports. You see it everywhere. And it's really, really tough to win when thousands of people are jeering at you, booing, hoping you lose. Now, mind you, nothing obviously excessive. They do have the reminder that UA stands for class and dignity before every game. You've heard it. I wouldn't call it anything extreme from what I've seen, other than the time at Regents Field that guy jumped the fence and tried to get into the dugout, but that wasn't in Tuscaloosa. That was crazy. But getting off that tangent, this is how this team can win games, is by having that atmosphere. The players have fed on it. The coaching staff even has fed on it. And they notice it, and it's a big part in what this team's going to be able to do. It was a big part in the regional last year. And, it's a cornerstone, I think, as much as any of the on-field product in this program. The coaching staff and the players want this to be a product that the people can get invested in and get behind.
Well, this is a huge weekend series, Thursday at 6, Friday at 6, and Saturday at 2 against Texas A&M. All right, Will Miller, let's put the baseball to bed. We've talked enough baseball for the people. We'll talk a whole lot of baseball on the program. The last 2 days, I've been talking about A-Day. Kalen DeBoer's first A-Day. Alabama Crimson Tide team. The team offense wins 34-28. Is that what it was? So team offense looks good at the beginning, and then team defense looks good in the end. Will Miller, I put out my top 5 offensive players that impressed me and defensive players that impressed me, but I'm going to pin you down. You're the expert. So who's the one player on offense or defense that impressed you at A-Day?
I would say Jeremy Bernard, Washington transfer, one of those guys that Kalen DeBoer is going to be bringing along as part of his transition from the University of Washington. And he was excellent. He eclipsed triple digits, ran really well from a route standpoint, got open, seemed to have that chemistry with Jalen Milroe. And Ty Simpson may make it a quarterback battle, honestly. But if Jalen Milroe is, in fact, the presumptive starter, you want him to have that connection with those guys. Um, he had over triple digits in receiving yards throughout the game and made contested catch or two. It seemed like he was ready for the moment. I know it's a different type of conversation than when we're in the middle of SEC football season. Absolutely, that's the case. It's a different conversation. But in terms of A-Day, in terms of the sample size that we have now, and not only that, but also what his teammates have said about him and the various availabilities throughout spring practice, which I can't believe is already over. It seems like he's turned a lot of heads in the right direction.
So A-Day is behind us. Spring practice is behind us. Kalen DeBoer is off and running. Will Miller, how you feel like it's going? You got some people detracting. Oh, the transition's going good. The transition's going bad. Nick Saban's hanging around too much. He's not hanging around enough. Just kind of put us, give us a bookmark. Well, how do you think the transition is going from legendary head coach Nick Saban to Kalen DeBoer?
I think it's difficult to judge just because of the seismic nature of things. That's a word I used on the very first show we had when Kalen got hired, and I think it's still the case. It's hard to compare. This is unlike anything we've seen. In terms of Kalen DeBoer himself, I think he knows that. I think he understands the magnitude of where things are and has risen to it. He's well spoken, seems to be an involved presence, as obviously does Nick Saban. I think in terms of, and I said this again, I said this back in January, I think there's a certain level of the curtain's only going to get pulled back to the maximum extent once you start playing the games. And there's no substitute for that. There's no way to replicate it truly. But what you can do is assess the eye test. And I think that Kalen DeBoer has risen to that. And I'm sure he's had the conversations about that particular aspect of things, but it looks like they're ready for the season to start. The players that are here have bought into this new coaching staff. There seems to be a certain palpable energy around the program. Definitely a lot of changes. It is a transition period in a lot of key ways. And I think we're at a point right now where the last unknowns aren't going to be answered until you pull back the curtain on August 31st to play Western Kentucky and go from there.
Well, we've got 130 something days until that happens, so plenty of time to get into football. But the college basketball and college football transfer portal windows are wide open. The football window hasn't really, not a whole lot of activity yet. Still, from the Alabama perspective, not a whole lot of departures or arrivals. I guess you can officially say Caden Proctor is an arrival, but not a whole lot of drama this week for that. Let's talk basketball because you've seen lots of departures, and that's okay. It's the way the sport goes, but the most recent, I've already talked about Sam Walters. The most recent departure is Nick Pringle. Nick Pringle last night. It seems like a trend. These guys are all going to the portal after 9 p.m. It's like, I don't know. It's like their bodies are still on West Coast time because they spent, 3 weeks out there on the West Coast for their historic run. But now Nick Pringle joins Sam Walters and joins really a bevy of guys. Chris Parker. I have my list right there. Chris Parker, Rylan Griffin. Obviously, Aaron Estrada is out of eligibility. Davin Cosby and Sam Walters all going into the transfer portal. Will, you shedding tears over Nick Pringle?
I expected it since around December or so. I'm not shocked by this. I just felt like he would want to be somewhere else. And I know that the energy that he brought throughout the NCAA tournament may have given the lie to that sentiment just because of the presence he was on the floor, the type of teammate that he was. But really, that's not new from him. You saw it in March Madness last year as well. I think that Blake Byler tweeted this out, that, he left it all out there on the floor when he was at Alabama. I just think it was time to move on. And so no, my jaw's not on the floor. And I think that he will find a fit somewhere. It wasn't his year. It wasn't his year this year. He had some struggles, some injury difficulties, some suspensions. He had a couple brief ones that he, came back from. And I think that kind of got the message on some of those. But again, just all things considered, it seems like the whole deal just kind of ran its course. And what a team guy he was. And what a great presence that he was throughout the historic Final Four run that we're just now and is just now in the rearview mirror. But I think he'll find a fit somewhere, but I'm not surprised.
All right, so help me now, because Mark Sears has made an announcement about an hour ago, roughly an hour ago, saying that he's declaring for the NBA while maintaining his college eligibility. The deadline to declare his withdrawal from the NBA is June 16th. So he's got April, May, June, 2 months roughly from today to get evaluated and decide if he wants to stay in the draft process or return to school. All right, so you get to decide. Does Alabama have 3 portal spots or 4 portal spots? Is Mark Sears going to come back to school? Because if he comes back to school, the Crimson Tide has 3 portal spots. And if he stays in the NBA draft process, then Alabama will have 4 spots to fill. Will Miller, does Nate Oates have 4 spots to fill or 3?
I think he'll end up having 4. And it may not even just be about Mark Sears. We saw reports yesterday that former Auburn guard Aiden Holloway is coming to visit Alabama today. No, beg your pardon. Tomorrow is Thursday. Like I said at the top of the show, it's that point in the semester you get them confused. The days they all run together. But if there is interest and he decides to come to the capstone, then I probably think that would spell the end for Mark Sears, which the optics of that are not going to please the fan base. But the reality is, I mean, not only is the NBA draft class this year pretty weak, even by expert standards, you also wonder if Mark Sears has given everything in an Alabama uniform that he possibly can. And is now the time for him to take that opportunity and go pro, whether it be the NBA, getting a shot in the NBA, or going overseas, or testing the waters of the transfer portal, which I don't see as overly likely at this exact second, because I think that he sees this as a juncture where he can test that professional pathway. But either way, as of this announcement, I don't expect him back.
All right, so we'll say goodbye to Mark Sears for now, and we'll see how and what he does in the NBA draft process. The NBA draft is 10 days after that deadline. I think it's June 26th. So we'll be watching with bated breath to see what Mark Sears does. You mentioned Aiden Holloway, so let's talk some rumors. Alabama is reaching out to several different players: Cliff Amore, Aiden Holloway, and Liam McNeely. Liam McNeely is a class of 2024. What is he? 5-star player out of Montberry Academy in Florida. Is the number 15 overall player. Now, you've got Alabama in on a lot of these good players. Cliff Amore, the 6'11", 7-footer, whatever you want to call it, from Rutgers, big-time rim defender, and obviously Aiden Holloway, the fellow that you just alluded to. All 3 guys with lots of potential. And okay, in a perfect world, you get them all, and that's great. But Will Miller, if you only got one, what's the one guy out of those 3 that you get? I mean, all 3 of them highly, highly talented and would fit into the system. This kid, Liam McNeely, is basically super Sam Walters. So it's a 1-for-1 fit, basically, but better. Cliff Amore, you didn't have a rim protector all year long. Mark Sears is gone in this hypothetical situation. So Aiden Holloway, you need a ball-handling guard who can play fast-paced style in the SEC. Will Miller, you only get one. Who's the one guy you get?
Yeah, I'm picking Rutgers. The rim protector or lack thereof was one of the most glaring issues for the Alabama team this past season, not having that big that could go compete on the inside from a physicality standpoint. Replicating that, it's not something you really want to be without. Obviously, this team was able to have great success. We know that. You know that. You were in Phoenix. But that's where I think the direction is going to go. I still think that Nate Oates saw enough to recognize that absence was glaring this past season.
What do you think about Omar Ballo going to Indiana? Words and I guess rumors say that his asking price was $1.2 million.
I'll tell you this for sure: Indiana's sick of sucking, and I think they haven't really come around to the idea that this just might be reality post. And I know it's been a while since Bob Knight, but this just may be reality post Bob Knight. But Indiana doesn't want to accept that. Historic venue, great tradition and fan base. There was a lot of questions as to whether Mike Woodson would keep his job this past season. Would Indiana be one of those jobs that opened up? We had a lot of major jobs open up this past cycle. Kentucky, Louisville, and Michigan all in one shot. I can guarantee you that never happens again. And you never know what's going to happen in college sports, but I feel pretty sure about that one. They almost added Indiana to the mix. I think this is the type of impact get that Mike Woodson needs and that Indiana needs. The Big Ten, it feels like maybe more open than it appears, um, just because, Michigan State isn't at the height of its power. Michigan's reeling. They hired Dusty May, who's obviously a proven coach at Florida Atlantic. You have and gosh, what others? You got the likes of Ohio State, which recently hired their interim head coach, who actually did a pretty decent job here to end off the season. Fred Hoiberg was great at Nebraska last year, by the way, and I know I'm missing a couple off of the top of my head in terms of who was like really good in the Big Ten. But my point is, even with where the records stand, I feel like the league is more open than those indicate. And I think that if Indiana can be competitive in that league, it may be a situation, where it's not like 2 years ago where they were playing into the NCAA tournament. And once again, I'm blanking on who was really at the top of the heap, and I shouldn't be. But this is the
Illinois.
type of, yeah, of course, Illinois. Yeah, that's the one.
Illinois, Iowa State.
Yeah, Iowa State's in the Big 12.
Oh, yeah.
But no, Illinois, Brad Underwood's done a tremendous job over there, revitalizing a program that was really good up until the mid 2000s, and then fell upon some hard times. But he's been a great coach for them, and he's had them seeded as a number one seed before during the COVID season, the year after COVID started. Got trounced by UConn, which is really not an indictment of anything.
Who didn't?
Right, exactly. But I think Indiana wants to compete. I think they want to compete now. I feel certain that the people that are, filling out the donor forms are certainly in that camp. And maybe that played a role in landing him, I guess. I know I got really long-winded with that, but that's the type of impact move that you'd expect them to make if they've got donors with deep pockets that are just tired of it.
All right, last thing for Will Miller before we get on out of here. You're following him at Real WB Miller on the Twitter machine, and you can follow him for all of Bama Central's baseball coverage. Big series this weekend against Texas A&M, Thursday at 6, Friday at 6, and Saturday at 2 p.m. over at Sewell Thomas Stadium. Get out there and support the Crimson Tide. We're staying in the transfer portal, Will Miller. The last 2 days, like we said, I talked Alabama offense on Monday and Alabama defense on Tuesday. I basically teased the transfer portal on Monday and Tuesday, saying these are Alabama's offensive needs and these are Alabama's defensive needs. You're not a dummy. Everybody who wants to hear my opinion can go back and listen to those shows. For you today, one pick out of the transfer portal. What are you adding to the football team? You take the rim protector for the basketball team, but the football team's definitely going to be shopping in the transfer portal. There's some needs. What's the one thing that Will Miller's adding to this team for Kalen DeBoer to make sure that he gets to the college football playoff?
Well, I think that, and there's a good amount of talent on this side already, but I'm almost adding a defensive back. You can never go wrong with those, especially when you're losing two high impact guys like Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terrion Arnold. They brought in Keon Sabb. Obviously, there were rumors very early in this transition process that Jabbar Muhammad was coming. That would have been a massive, massive get had they been able to pull it off. I don't know how far that went, but the rumors flew around, as well as I do. But you can never say no to a really good defensive back, whether it be a guy who's better in man, a guy who's better in zone. You want that versatility because the SEC is going to throw it at you from an offensive scheming standpoint. You always want to feel confident when you're talking about the defensive backfield. I feel like, and I was having this conversation with a friend of mine recently, where the MO in modern football is the passing game has evolved as limit chunk plays and don't get beat deep. And with a really, really good cover guy, you can do both of those things at once.
He's Will Miller. He's joined us on the show several dozen times. Will, this is like our 200 and something episode. Can you believe it? We made it this long.
Man, it's been awesome, Joe. I still remember that first week.
There we go. So we're going to have a lot of fun the rest of the week. I'm going to try to get out to the Joe on Friday. That sounds like my day. Friday, maybe Saturday, but definitely Friday sounds like my aim to go see Alabama against Texas A&M live in person. We'll catch up on the softball side of things in the next couple of days as well. Oh, my goodness. Those ladies having a rough time, a real rough time in the SEC. And so we'll have to update you on that as well, probably with Katie Wyndham or someone else, one of our other softball experts. Well, let's get out of here for the day. You got anything else that people need to know that I was a dummy and left off the plate?
Well, UFC 300 was great. So if you get the chance to go rewatch that, I'd highly suggest it. I won't spoil anything for those who don't know, but trust me, totally worth it.
Yeah, it was a great card, and the UFC keeps rolling on. So we will keep following it all with Will Miller right here on the Joe Gaither Show. Let's get out of here for the day. You watched us on YouTube, on Facebook, and Twitter. You'll listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on Amazon. It's the Joe Gaither Show on Bama Central, and we appreciate everybody who subscribed, rated, and reviewed the show. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Joe Gaither Show right here on Bama Central and Bama Central.